9th of October, 1943. A grass strip somewhere in eastern England. The mist still clinging to the hedgerows. A young pilot officer climbs into the cockpit of a battered training aircraft, the kind normally reserved for cadets learning to find the runway in bad light. He straps in, checks his gauges out of habit, and pauses. Something is wrong. The altimeter needle does not move. Neither does the airspeed indicator. He taps the glass anyway, the way pilots always do, though he already knows why nothing stirs beneath his finger. The dials in front of him are not instruments at all. They are painted card, cut to shape, glued into housings that once held real bakelite and brass. Somewhere above the clouds, or so the story goes, a German fighter controller is listening to radio traffic that suggests this aircraft is behaving exactly like every other machine in the sky. Climbing, banking, correcting, flying as though its pilot has a full panel in front of him. He does not. He is flying on instinct, on the horizon, on the feel of the aircraft through the seat of his trousers, and on a story that nobody on the other side has any reason to doubt. That, at least, is how the tale is told among some corners of RAF folklore, passed between veterans at reunions, half remembered in oral histories, occasionally surfacing in aviation forums where enthusiasts argue over whether it happened exactly as described, happened in a smaller and stranger form, or never happened at all in the way the legend suggests. What follows is that story, told as a story. It deserves to be said plainly at the outset. The specific claim that RAF pilots routinely flew operational sorties with painted cardboard standing in for genuine flight instruments is not something that can be verified against surviving squadron records, and no chapter of official RAF history confirms it in this form. What can be verified is that deception was woven into nearly everything the RAF did during the war, from dummy airfields built to draw bombs away from real ones, to jamming operations that bent enemy radio beams without the enemy ever realizing it. Whether this particular tale belongs alongside those confirmed operations, or whether it grew out of them the way legends often do, is something the record simply does not settle. Told honestly, though, it is still worth telling, because it captures something true about the spirit of the era, even if the details cannot be pinned to a single verified incident. By the middle years of the war, the problem the story describes was a real one, whatever its exact solution turned out to be. Britain in 1940 and 41 was desperately short of precision instruments. The Air Ministry's own production figures show the demand for blind flying panels, gyroscopic compasses, and turn indicators consistently outstripped what British factories could deliver, particularly after the Coventry raids of November 1940 flattened a significant slice of the country's instrument-making capacity in a single night. A trained pilot without functioning instruments was, in cloud or at night, in genuine danger, not from the enemy, but from the sky itself. Vertigo, spatial disorientation, and the simple loss of the horizon killed far more aircrew in training than most people realize. Some wartime estimates put non-combat losses from disorientation and instrument failure at a meaningful fraction of total training casualties. At the same time, German intelligence gathering, through captured aircraft, through agents, through simple observation of RAF formations, was assumed by British planners to be constantly probing for weakness, for any sign that a squadron was under-equipped, poorly trained, or flying with compromised aircraft. An enemy who believed the RAF was struggling might press an advantage. An enemy who believed the opposite might hold back. Deception in this climate was not a curiosity. It was policy practiced at every level from Bletchley Park down to the paint shop of a maintenance unit. It is into this world that the story of the cardboard panel fits, whether as literal fact, embellished memory, or invented parable. As it is usually told, the idea did not come from a single inventor, but from ground crews working at scattered maintenance units. Men whose daily job was repairing damaged instrument panels and who noticed, out of necessity, that a convincing dummy panel could be built from pressed cardboard, a coat of matte grey paint, and salvage glass or perspex fronts taken from instruments too badly damaged to repair. The story holds that on training flights, and occasionally on short operational hops, close to home where the risk of cloud was low, and the pilot knew the route by heart, aircraft with a shortage of working gauges were sent up with these dummy panels fitted in place of missing instruments, so that from the outside, and to any observer studying wreckage or photographs, nothing looked amiss. A convincing panel in this telling needed to survive three kinds of scrutiny: a quick glance from a ground crew inspection, a photograph taken from a discreet distance, and, in the worst case, examination after a crash landing on home soil, where haste in getting the pilot clear might mean nobody looked closely at the dials before the aircraft was towed away. The materials involved, as described in the legend, were almost absurdly humble. Pressboard roughly the thickness of a cereal packet, tin paint decanted from RAF stores, and a stencil kit borrowed from the squadron's sign writer. A single dummy panel, by this account, could be produced in an afternoon, at a cost that maintenance officers joked was less than the price of a decent dinner in the mess. Whether or not this exact production process ever took place as described, the broader environment it depends on is well attested. Maintenance units across Britain did routinely improvise, repair, and adapt, because supply chains for genuine components were unreliable, and pilots needed serviceable aircraft faster than the official channels could provide them. Ground crew ingenuity of this kind is one of the best documented threads of RAF operational history, even where any single specific trick, like painted cardboard standing in for a working gyroscope, cannot be traced to a named unit, a named crew, or a surviving inspection report. If you are finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. The operational picture, as the legend presents it, is deliberately modest. Nobody claims that heavily instrumented night bombing raids over the Ruhr were flown on dummy panels. The risk of disorientation in cloud over enemy territory would have made that suicidal, and no version of the story suggests otherwise. Instead, the tale is usually set among short-range fighter patrols and training squadrons operating over home territory in clear weather, where a pilot's own senses could substitute for instruments he trusted less than his instincts anyway. Some retellings place the practice at forward airstrips in the days after D-Day, when replacement instruments were slow to arrive and squadrons wanted every serviceable-looking aircraft in the air to maintain the appearance of full strength. Resistance networks and captured Luftwaffe debriefs are occasionally cited in second-hand accounts as evidence that German intelligence never flagged British instrument shortages as a weakness worth exploiting. But these citations tend to trace back to other tellings of the same story, rather than to an original document, which is worth being honest about rather than dressing up as proof. Compared with what is actually documented on the German side, the contrast is instructive regardless of whether the cardboard panel story is literally true. The Luftwaffe, chronically short of raw materials by 1943 and 1944, was known to fit training aircraft with reduced instrument fits as a genuine acknowledged economy measure, not disguised, simply accepted, because German industrial planners were candid internally about the shortage, even where propaganda outward was not. American forces, better supplied throughout the war, thanks to a manufacturing base untouched by bombing, rarely faced this dilemma at all. USAAF squadrons in Europe are not associated with any comparable improvisation, real or legendary, because they did not need it. If the British story has a kernel of truth in it, its distinguishing feature is not the shortage itself, which every combatant nation experienced in some form, but the specifically theatrical response to it, presenting a convincing appearance rather than simply operating with visibly reduced equipment, the way German training units are documented as having done. The deeper legacy of the story, whatever its factual core, sits comfortably alongside things the RAF undeniably did. Decoy airfields, dummy aircraft built from wood and canvas, radio deception that led German bombers to drop their loads on empty fields. These are not legend but documented history, verified in official records and visible today in surviving decoy structures preserved by aviation museums. The cardboard panel story, true in every detail, true in outline only, or entirely apocryphal, draws its power from sitting naturally beside those confirmed operations. It feels true because the culture that surrounded it was real. Pilots did fly with less than they should have had. Ground crews did improvise. Deception was, provably, everywhere in the RAF's daily practice. From the grand scale of dummy invasion fleets down to a mechanic quietly swapping a broken dial for something that merely looked the part. So return for a moment to that grass strip and that pilot officer with his hand on a painted dial that will never move. Whether he existed exactly as described, or whether he is a composite built from a dozen half-remembered afternoons in a dozen maintenance sheds, the story he stands in for is not really about cardboard at all. It is about a service that understood, instinctively, that a war is fought as much on appearances as on hardware. That an aircraft which looked whole could do the work of one that was, and that an enemy convinced of your strength will often behave as though you have it, whether or not the gauges in front of your pilot are glass or paper. The RAF never needed every instrument to be real. It only needed the enemy to believe that they were. And that true story or treasured myth is a trick worth remembering.